Okay, so the first two steps were discussed in the two prior videos to this. Step number 3 is learning and practicing to calm anxiety down quickly when you realize that it's starting to occur. And this is important because these are the steps that are going to start unconditioning anxiety, or rather to start conditioning relaxation and peace. And that's a really important step, is to recognize it quickly. And in order to do that, we have to understand the triggers that we have about anxiety. What are the triggers? A lot of people are very unconscious of what triggers their anxiety. Often it's the media, it's the news, it's the stuff they hear on the radio, the news usually. It can be friends that are dramatic, that bring up things. Now, this doesn't mean get rid of your friends. In step 2, we talked about listening to the facts. We don't have to dive into the pool of emotion with our friends. We can let them swim and enjoy the pool of emotions. We can stay out of the drama and just listen to the facts. We don't have to agree with everything that we're being told. We don't have to agree with everything we're telling ourselves. When we do get that sense of anxiety starting to begin, just notice what anxiety feels like and then backtrack. Where does anxiety start? For people, anxiety usually begins somewhere in the body, meaning that there's a literally physical feeling in the body that begins. It begins in the kidneys, it begins in the stomach, it begins in the heart, or it starts to build itself up, and by the time it's over the bulk of the body, we're having a panic attack. And we're so anxious that maybe we're overwhelmed and we can't think straight. We're too emotional. You're all over the place with emotions. That's often how anxiety presents itself. Backtrack it to the first part where you understand how you know you have anxiety. So the question you ask yourself, or that I would ask you if we were in a session, is how do you know you have anxiety? So people often say, well, I'm emotional, I'm overwhelmed, I'm all over the place. Okay, what was it like just before you were all over the place? How did that being overwhelmed start? And they answer like, well, I had this weird, my heart started to pump really quick. Okay, and what was it like just before the heart started to pump really quick? And they think for a moment and they'll think like, well, my stomach was kind of hurting, or I had a weird feeling in my kidneys, or my back tightened up, my lower back tightened up, or there's always some kind of physical sensation. Then what was happening just before the lower back tightened up? And they would say something like, well, I was talking to my friend so-and-so. Okay, what were you talking about with so-and-so? Well, we were talking about the news. And this is how you go backwards to find out what triggers the anxiety. And even the trigger itself isn't the issue, it's the reaction to the trigger. So even if you may not be able to initially find out what the trigger is, you can look at the reaction. So say if the first thing you notice physically is a tensing in the back, or a weird feeling in the kidneys, or a weird feeling in the stomach. The easiest way to counteract this, because think of like it's a little snowball at the top of a hill and it starts rolling down the hill. By the time it's at the bottom of the hill, it collects extra snow and it gets bigger. So instead of letting anxiety snowball, the easiest thing to do is to catch it at the top of the hill and to just flatten it all out and not let it continue to roll. And the easiest way to do this is with the breath. So one of the quick exercises that I always teach people when they recognize it's starting to happen is to put themselves in a different state. And the way you change your state the quickest is with body posture, with movement, and with breath. So a way to do this is to think of what you want instead of anxiety. One of the biggest questions coaches can ask is, what would you like to have happen, or what do you want? And think of what you would rather have instead of anxiety. If it's relaxation or peace, peace is a really good one. So I'll stick with peace. So how does, first off, if you think of an anxious person, how does an anxious person move? Well, anxious people, maybe they're going to be fidgety, or what's their posture going to be like? They're going to be worried, they're going to be fidgety, they're going to be maybe crying or trying to keep from crying, or they're going to be deep in thought. And what's an anxious person's breath going to be like? It's going to be maybe shallow and fast and uncontrolled, almost close to like sobbing or heaving because they're tight in the chest. That's how we recognize if our breathing is getting like that. You can almost create anxiety without any thought process just by doing the movement, the breathing. So what is a peaceful person's posture like? Peaceful person's posture is maybe upright and relaxed. The muscles are loose and they're just very relaxed and nice posture, right? And what is a peaceful person's movement like? Well, it's relaxed and slow and coordinated. And what is their breathing like? Their breathing is nice and deep and relaxed. So then take on that breathing, nice and controlled and relaxed, and then notice, what is relaxation feel like in the body? What are the body characteristics, the physical characteristics of relaxation and peace? And then is it warmth? Where in the body do you feel that? And then continue that breath of how a peaceful person would breathe. And that's a really, really powerful exercise. You can choose a lot of different exercises to keep anxiety from snowballing, to catch it early on, the second that you recognize it, and to stop it in place. Every time that it starts, to just stop it in place. And this is one of the biggest, most powerful exercises to allow anxiety to be stopped early on in its tracks, is to ask yourself, what would I rather have instead of anxiety? Is it peace? Is it relaxation? Is it confidence? Is it happiness? Is it laughter? And then ask, how does a happy person breathe? And how does a relaxed person breathe? Or how does a confident person breathe? Take on the physical characteristics first. A confident person stands a particular way, shoulders back, chest out, upright, proud and strong. And how does a confident person move? They move with surety and with confidence, right? So then take on the breath and do the breathing for 30 seconds or for a minute and notice the change. Notice how you know that, in my example, how do you know in your body that you are feeling peace? How do you know you're feeling relaxation? Notice where it is, notice how it feels, and then notice the anxiety isn't there anymore. And that's a really, really powerful way to keep anxiety from snowballing. So the third step is practicing calming down anxiety before it really gets to be any big deal. This is a really powerful exercise. The biggest, most important thing is to recognize your triggers, recognize your reactions, where you start to feel anxiety the most, or where you start to feel anxiety first, and then catch it earlier and earlier and earlier. Have a plan in place. Notice whenever you feel that funny sensation, if it starts in the kidneys or it starts in the stomach, notice it, or when you notice your breathing getting tight, or you notice your thoughts starting to get out of control, catch it right there and have a plan in place. Start your practice right then and there. Change your body posture. Even if you're in a business meeting, change your body posture, change your breath. Nobody's gonna think anything of it. You can do it. It's completely internal work, hidden from everybody. All they're gonna see you is shift and breathe differently, but you can notice your state changing completely, stopping it early. That's a really, really big, very powerful thing to do. So then we'll move on to step 4 in the next video. Everybody be well, and I'll see you soon.